All right, hello. Today we are taking a quick review of what exponents are and looking at how we can use exponents to rewrite multiplication and also to evaluate exponents. As a review, an exponent, remember, is just a way to write repeated multiplication. In other words, it's multiplication with the same number used over and over and over again. So we can rewrite expressions like 4 times 4 times 4 with the exponent or using the exponent of 4 to the third power. So if you remember, this 4 is what's considered the base, so that's the number that's being multiplied, that's the factor. And then the exponent, so in this case 3, tells us how many times that factor is being used. So here, the parts of an exponential expression, like we just said, would be the base for x, and then the exponent would be n here. And we would read this as x to the nth power. So up here, this would be 4 to the third power. As a side note, something that I always think is good to know is that there are two exponents that have a separate name. So for example, if you had x to the second power, we could also read that as x squared. And if you had x to the third power, that could also be read as x cubed. So those are just useful to know going forward. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at expanded notation versus the exponential expression versus the value. So for example, 11 times 11 would become 11 squared, or 11 to the second power, and its value would be 11 times 11, or 121. So down here, for example, if we skip down to number 4, if we have 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4, this actually would become 1/4 to the third power, which if we multiply across, 1 times 1 times 1 is 1, and then 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 again would be 64, so this would become 1/64. Skipping down to some other examples, so if we look at example number 6, here we have multiple factors. So we're going to look at what is being repeated in its multiplication. So in this case, our first factor is an 8. 8 is used as a factor 4 times, and then we're also going to multiply that by another factor of -2, and -2 is being used as a factor 3 times. You will be able to use a calculator for this. So in this case, what I would suggest doing is taking 8 to the 4th power, so that 8 times 8 times 8 times 8, and evaluating that, which on a side note would be 4,096. And then we would multiply that by -2 multiplied by itself 3 times, which is going to give us an example of an answer of -8. So if we multiply those, we end up with a value of -32,768. We can also use exponents, which might be something new, using variables. So if we skip down to number 9, our factor that we're using is xy. So what we would do here is this would actually become xy, and then how many times is it being used as a factor would be 5 times. Here we can't find a value for it because we don't know what x and y equal, so this would be as far as we could go with this problem. If you go down to number 11, just looking at that, you can see that 9 is being used as a factor 3 times, and we have k being used as a factor 6 times. On this one, we can evaluate 9 to the third power, so 9 times 9 times 9, which would give us 729, but since we don't know what k is, then we would write this as 729k to the sixth. All right, so those are your examples. Your homework assignment then would be to finish the rest of this page. Make sure that you are filling out the exponential expressions for everything, and that you are finding the value for any of the ones that contain integers, fractions, and things like that. If it's just a variable like number 8, you would just have the exponential expression.